This is 19 tonight. I'm going to try this morning. I'm going to try and get this through in decent time. Genesis 19, verse 19. 19:19. I'm going to read this verse, and when I do, you're going to think, what? But we're going to start with it. Genesis 19, verse 19. It says this, "Indeed now, your servant has found favor in your sight, and you have increased your mercy, which you have shown me by saving my life. But I cannot escape to the mountains, lest some evil overtake me and I die." Wasn't that inspiring? 19:19. Just to begin with, part of what honed me in on this verse is we find the first use of the word mercy. Now, I'm aware that many of your Bibles put kindness or loving kindness there. I'm not really sure why they did that. The general consensus is translators do that because kindness is a more familiar word. It is familiar, but I don't know that anybody here could define it. If I ask you what's the definition of kindness, you'd probably say like it's the act of being kind. It's being nice. And really mercy, that word is a deeper word than that. It's a word that talks about letting someone off the hook is really a good definition of that word. Letting someone off the hook. I don't think niceness capitalizes on that, and I think we've all heard the word mercy. What we've got here is a verse that is right in the middle of the narrative of Lot and Sodom and Gomorrah. Lot has been forcibly evicted from Sodom. His wife and his daughters. The angels had to take them by the arm and lead them out the gate. Telling them wasn't enough. And then the angels had sold them. God told him, "You need to head to the mountains because I'm going to burn this thing to the ground." And Lot was absolutely paralyzed. And he was so paralyzed that he could not even go to the mountains. He couldn't obey. Now, this isn't rebellion like you don't tell me what to do. It is an absolute spiritual numbness and an inability to act. But he does say this, "You've been merciful to me." And that word mercy meant the same thing to Lot that it means to us. When God is merciful to us today, same thing. Now this goes back a long way. And so I want to do a little bit of comparison contrast, so to speak, today on mercy. Because there is so much in Lot's story that we share. So let's look a little bit, because I got to tell you, when you say Lot and Sodom and Gomorrah, most of us don't say, "Oh yeah, that's me," do we? But we share a lot. So let's look at this a little bit. Look at the mercy we see in Lot's life. Let's give you a little bit of background. Some of you know this story really well, so I think you're ahead of me a little bit. But Lot came from a life of spiritual advantage. I think if anybody in his generation had spiritual advantage, he was the guy. He was reared in the home of Abraham. You've heard of Abraham. Abraham was a traveling city. Abraham had 3,500, they estimate, people in his household. They were as big as Crane. And they moved around. They were agricultural. They had flocks. They had herds. Lot grew up. Basically, he's Abraham's nephew, pardon me, but he grew up basically as Abraham's son. And he had all those advantages. This is the greatest man of faith in the day. And Lot saw that. He ended up wealthy in his own right. Lot grew up not only in wealth, but watching Abraham commit himself and everything he had to God. One of our greatest enemies in our lives is prosperity. Not many people can be rich and faithful. It is a temptation most people can't bear. The Psalms say, no good thing will he withhold from him that walks uprightly. And I am doing my best, I feel like, to serve God. So why am I not rich? Why don't I have billions of dollars? I'm just asking a question, and I'm talking about me. Why? If I had $1 billion, I could fix our budget. I could support missionaries. I mean, I cannot tell you the things I could do, what a blessing I could be. So why hasn't God given me that money? What is wrong with God here? The only thing I can figure is it wouldn't be a good thing. If God is true, and he is, and he says no good thing will he withhold from him that walks uprightly. Either I'm not walking uprightly, or being a billionaire wouldn't be good for me. Now, I don't know whether God really believes I walk uprightly, but I do believe being a billionaire probably wouldn't be good for me, because I fear that I would be like the average person. If you gave me enough money, I would run as fast and as far from God as I could with it. I can't tell you how many people I've had tell me over the years, with this or that happens, man, I remember people telling me, if my Amway business hits it, we're building a family life center for the church. Problem is, nobody hit it with an Amway, but the truth is, I have seen people that were faithful with things come into a big amount of money, and all of a sudden, being a tither was a bit much. And you think, well, that wouldn't be me. Let me tell you, Donna and I have always been very faithful in giving. We always have. When her father died, we were still in Crane. And he left a CD to be divided between her and her sister. And it was like $40,000. And we give 20%. We've worked up to that over the years. And that was no problem when it was weekly pay. But $40,000, that was an $8,000 check. $8,000. And as a general, I still tithe with the check, because they charge us a little fee when it's electronic, and I get checks free with my account, so saves the church a couple of bucks, and I write this check. And I'm in Crane in my office, and I sit down to write that $8,000 check. That was not easy. All of a sudden, I instead of saying, oh God, thank you that we're able to give this, I started rethinking that. Because $8,000, we had places to put $8,000. We got places to put $8,000 today. And I sat and began to think, $4,000 a tithe, and we can give a couple of hundred to missions. I started thinking that through, and I caught myself, and I said, all right, buddy, put your big boy pants on and write the check. But I was not grinning. It was hard. Now, what if that had been $400,000? How much is 20% of that? $40,000? What if it had been $4 million? $400,000? What could I buy with $400,000? I'm telling you, if God gave me enough money, I'd double clutch till I disobeyed with it. All of a sudden, you guys wouldn't be good enough for me. I'd want to go to an uptown church, right? Us wealthy people, we want to be around other wealthy people. I wouldn't be you bunch of blue-collar people. I'd need to be around people in my own station. Have you noticed people that are wealthy tend to go to churches full of wealthy people? I'm not saying they're out of God's will, but you definitely would not be good enough for me. Right? It would affect me. And I'm thinking not good. But Abraham was one of the greatest men of his day. And he had given everything to God. What I'm saying is, Lot had watched God bless Abraham's obedience. There was no excuse for Lot becoming anything but a man of faith. I honestly believe that. It was a reasonable thing to put a high expectation on Lot. He grew up with Abraham. And some people, I know some people can grow up in areas where they can, I can kind of plead for failure because I grew up at a lot of disadvantage and I had a lot of things happen to me and a lot of trauma, but not Lot. He had no excuse. And Lot was a believer. 2 Peter chapter 2 verse 8 tells us that he was a righteous man and he vexed his righteous soul. So this guy was the genuine deal. He knew God. And yet we watch and read his life and he was a spiritual failure in just about every measure. And his background, where he came from, makes the failure even more tragic. He separated from his spiritual strength. The day came when Abraham and Lot's group were so big that Abraham had to approach him and tell him, we're going to have to divide because the land just won't bear us. There's too many of us. By the time we get the sheep moved in, we're scalping the land. He said, you decide where you're going to go, Abraham said, and he said, I'll go the opposite direction. And we're told in Genesis 13 that Lot eyed the well-watered plains of Sodom. And so he pitched his tent toward Sodom, is what we're told. He was attracted to Sodom, and Sodom was known for wickedness. When we have certain places, that's their reputation. Vegas is one of them. What happens in Vegas? I know people that drop a lot of money to take their kids to Disney or Universal. But you usually don't hear of Vegas being the go-to place to take your kids. There are some things there for kids, but I was there once with Donna once, and we had my son and daughter and grandkids, and just walking down Main Street embarrassed me. They had cars. Some of you guys have been there and you keep going and you may love the place, but I'm just saying, from my perspective, a pickup was carrying a lit sign up and down the strip saying they could have a woman in my room in 20 minutes. Let's take the kids there. And they had these guys standing on the sidewalk trying to hand you these cards with pornographic images on them. And if you wouldn't take one, I had a guy grab my arm, and I've got my granddaughter with me. She's 12. And he grabbed my arm, and he couldn't speak English, and I couldn't speak enough Spanish to talk to him because I wanted to say, have some dignity, man. I've got my granddaughter with me, and they're laying on the pavement, walking over it. Boy, this is where my family ought to go. That was Sodom. Sodom was known for wickedness. Even the wicked people called Sodom wicked. And so where does Lot go? He pitches his tent toward Sodom. But no big deal. He's still in his own he's got his own group. They've got their sheep. He's not like he's in the city. Except by Genesis 14, he'd moved his family into town. He lived and raised his family in that spirit of wickedness, and it began to chip away at him. And when Genesis 19 opens and the angels step into Sodom, Lot is sitting in the gate. That's where the elders sat. From all indications, Lot had become an elder in Sodom, which means the people really liked him. And he was on the city council. He had completely adopted Sodom's mottos and all that goes with it. And in time, he lost his spiritual dignity. He lost the respect of his family. He lost his living faith. He was still a believer, but he wasn't walking it. And he couldn't believe God anymore. And when God said, go tell your family you got to get out of here, He went to tell his sons-in-laws, and they laughed in his face. And they stayed and were destroyed. And even at that, the angels kept saying, we got to go, we got to go, we got to go. And they finally dragged him out of the city. And that's where we pick up here. And it's a sad tale with a strong spiritual example. By the time they got him out of the city, they say, go to the mountains, and he couldn't even move. He was a spiritual non-entity. He was doing more damage than good. And yet God made it a priority to show mercy on Lot. Is that amazing? He deserved to suffer judgment in Sodom. If anybody in Sodom, he knew better. These are a bunch of lost, blind sinners, and Lot knew better. But God spared him, and he didn't deserve that. It is a textbook example of mercy, because mercy is when we are let off the hook and didn't get what we deserve. That's mercy. If you ask someone for mercy and they say you don't deserve it, you could very well respond, of course I don't. It wouldn't be mercy. Nobody deserves mercy, but God showed it on Lot. So here's our comparison, because we got some spiritual parallels with Lot. Now, none of us could claim to be raised in Abraham's house. I grew up in a Christian home, but I don't think my mom or my dad would claim to be an Abraham. But we have been raised in a lot of spiritual privilege, haven't we? Some of us in Christian homes, even if not, we can see God's blessing on our nation. You can see it through our history, the time God had arranged things that we succeeded. We have access to church. There are churches everywhere. Everywhere you look. We have access to Bibles. There are Bibles everywhere, and we can read them. We have access to Christian radio. Christ's name is all over the place. I mean, they've got these billboards. You drive down I-20 and you're heading toward Sweetwater, and you see these messages signed by God. I'm a little bit uncomfortable with them, but they're there. Many of us grew up in Christian homes. We live in opulence compared to other countries and even past Americans. You know, they say our standard of living goes up year by year. It's kind of an interesting thing now. We get these young people that are saying, we'll never be able to live like our parents lived. My parents lived in a 750 square foot home with one used car. We had one bathroom that you could nearly touch shoulder to shoulder. That bathroom's still there. It gets smaller. The older I get, the smaller it gets. And we live a lot better than that now. I think with some of these people complaining, I want to think, why don't you come back home with me, see how you feel about that. That Oldsmobile with no air. The Studebaker. My sister called it the stupid baker. That, man, we live a lot better now. We live good lives. Times are good no matter what people say. A lot like Lot. We've grown up wealthy. We got a lot of Christian influence around us. And even as Christians, and I am not talking about you, I'm talking about us. We are not very spiritual people on the norm. We too have pitched our tents towards Sodom, haven't we? We are guilty of fraternizing with the enemy. If we don't do it, we'll watch it on TV. Sin doesn't even seem sinful to me. One of the controversies in Christianity, and I'm getting off my track here a little bit, so let me do it quickly, is eternal condemnation. There are an increasing number of preachers that do not believe in eternal condemnation. I mean, not eternal suffering. They believe that when you die, if you're lost, you will be, and you'll be gone, because they believe the penalty is simply too harsh. You know why they believe the penalty is too harsh? It's because they don't think sin is very sinful. And that is a struggling point. Why would God do that? That is such a horrible thing. Maybe we need to get a hold of how bad our sin is. But it doesn't seem bad. Because we're losing the consciousness of what sin is. Our faith isn't strong enough. You know, we have basically 8 services a week, and most of our Christians can't get into half of them. Because our faith isn't very strong. And often I have had people that live in open disobedience, and God have mercy that anybody even mention it, including the pastor. And like Lot, we've kind of lost our spiritual dignity and influence. And I think sometimes when we say you should share Christ with our neighbors, we think, I don't know that my neighbor would listen to me. Because I'm not any different than my neighbor. Maybe I'm worse. Why would I listen to me? Now, do those things mean we're not believers? I mean, maybe not. But not necessarily. Lot was a believer. But they do leave us with doubts and lack of peace and lack of fruit in our lives, and the knowledge that we are not good examples to lost people at all. And Christians are losing their kids at about 85% rate. 85 out of 100 Christian kids are leaving the faith. Kind of like Lot. Thank God he's merciful on us. Would you agree? Because we don't want what we deserve. I cannot imagine facing God and saying, I want what's coming to me. So I'm afraid God would say, yeah, I got what's coming to you right here, buddy. We need mercy. And God is increasingly merciful to us. So here's the thing, and I'm doing pretty good here. We don't have to take after Lot. We can take after Abraham. Wouldn't you rather face God having taken after Abraham? Well, I would hate for God in the judgment to bring Lot up and say, now where's my other lots, and them herd me in there. Abraham is our example. Well, was Abraham as happy as Lot? Oh, yeah. Much more so. He was a mighty man of faith. Now, I may never be an Abraham, but I would a lot rather be associated with him. It's not always the easier path, but it's a lot better path. You know, this morning in our Sunday school lesson, we're in 3 John, first half of the chapter, and a guy named Gaius. I realize that's not what we'd name a baby today, but his name was Gaius. And John is writing to him about him. And he says this, he said, those itinerant servants of God, those preachers that were moving through, they saw you in worship and you stayed in their homes. I'm paraphrasing. And I've heard about you, and I hear so many good things about you from these preachers that come through and see you. And I didn't bring the thought up, but I thought, I wonder how people talk about us. Because they were talking. Somebody that comes through and would go to church with me, ride up here with me, ride back to the house, spend a few days with me, going on down the road. I wonder when they get in the car to leave what they would say about me. I wonder if someone said, would you more compare him to Lot or Abraham? How many people would say, yep, there's a lot. Lot. We never really know how people view us, do we? We really don't know. They won't tell us, and anyone who will tell you is probably angry with you, and so you just get it worse than it is. You are everything wrong, you know. It's hard to know. But they talk. And if they don't talk, they think. If you invited someone to come with you to church, meet me here. I want to introduce you to Jesus Christ. It's a hard question, but would they think, well, man, I need something and I would love to have what you've got? Or would they think, why? I'm as good as you are and I don't have to give anybody my Sunday mornings. We had a guy when I was a youth director for not quite a year and a half, and we had a guy named Chris. Won't give you his last name. You wouldn't know him, but he was a karate guy and a good-looking guy and strong, and I mean everybody wanted to be around Chris, and he was a great guy in the youth department. Just a great guy, and I would talk to kids out and. If they went to Forest Oak Middle School at that time, he was an 8th grader, and I would. So you go to Forest Oak. Do you know Chris? Call his last name. Oh yeah, we know Chris. He's in our youth department. It took me about 6 months to realize that all those people were shutting down on me. When I'd say, "You know Chris?" "Yeah, I know Chris. He's in our youth department." You could just see. It took me a while to realize. You could see. Oh. Well, I don't want to go there. I quit using Chris. I don't know what it was because he was a great guy at church. He was a great guy when we played ball and all this stuff. He was a great guy. But there was something going on at middle school that it was like saying, oh, you go to Forest Oak? Well, you don't want to come to our church. I think I'd have been just as effective to have said that you don't want to go to our church. And I learned maybe we ought to omit the Chris line. I don't want to be Chris. You don't want to be Chris. None of us want to be Chris. Don't be a Lot. Lot went to his sons-in-law and says, we got to go. God's going to destroy this place. And they thought he was joking and laughed. I would hate to sit down with one of my kids and say, have you considered Christ? And them go, oh my. So what do we do? Well, let me challenge you. Here we are, 1st of February. Can you believe we've knocked a month of this year out? I don't know about you, but January seemed a little long to me. Now, I never say that. I never say that anymore. But it seemed like a long month. But February, 3 less days. Here we are in 2026. It still feels odd for me to write it. Make this a year of faith and faithfulness in your life. Do a good self-assessment. Psalm 139 thing. Search me, O God, and know my thoughts. Try me and know my ways. Ask God, what am I doing? Project. What do people see in me? Father, I don't want to be a reflection on Christ. I want to be a reflection of Christ. Give me some fruit. Father, I pray that I'll live in such a way and behave in such a way and speak in such a way and love in such a way that I would have good influence on people. Influence for Christ. Every one of us are capable of that. There are a lot of things I can't do and you can't do, but we can do that. We can live the life that we claim. Be an Abraham. Bow your heads with me.